Welcome to the SCARS Institute, audio brief podcast, created by the certified professionals at the SCARS Institute. This podcast uses AI to help you learn and better understand about criminal artificial intelligence, scams and fraud and scammers. Our SCARS Institute podcast also helps victims and survivors better understand how this happened to them and how to recover from the experience. We hope it helps you learn to recovery and be safe online. Make sure that you subscribe to our channel to hear all of our podcasts and enlightening videos.
All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive.
Yeah.
And this time we're going to be looking at the Sakawa Boys.
The Sakawa Boys in Ghana.
In Ghana, yeah. So this is going to be fascinating because, as you all know who listen to the show, we love to explore the intersection of culture and true crime.
Absolutely.
So the Sakawa Boys are going to be a great case study in that.
Yeah, they're notorious for blending modern cybercrime with traditional spiritual practices like Juju.
Yeah, and that's really what makes them so interesting and unique, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we've talked about cybercrime before.
Many times.
Many times, but this group is just doing something completely different.
A whole other level.
Yeah. So for this deep dive, we're going to be using a lot of research from the SCARS Institute.
Great organization.
Yeah, a lot of great work that they've been doing for a while now, really trying to understand and combat this phenomenon.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that the SCARS Institute, they approach this from a pretty neutral standpoint. They're not just trying to demonize the Sakawa Boys.
Yeah.
They're really trying to understand the socioeconomic factors, the cultural influences that have led to the rise of this group.
Yeah, they recognize it's a complex issue. It's not just about good guys and bad guys.
Right.
So we're going to try to do the same in this deep dive. We're going to look at the origins of the Sakawa Boys, how they've evolved over time, their methods, their motivations, and the impact they've had both on Ghana and on the wider world.
The reach is surprisingly global.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So without further ado, let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
So to understand the Sakawa Boys, I think we need to go back to the late 1990s, a time when Ghana was experiencing this kind of rapid expansion of internet access.
Right, a really pivotal time.
Yeah, but it's also a time of significant economic hardship.
Yeah, especially for young men.
Right. There was high unemployment, limited opportunities for advancement, and so you can kind of see how this created a breeding ground for cybercrime.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it was almost like this perfect storm. You have this new technology that opens up all these possibilities for making money, but you also have a generation of young people who are feeling disenfranchised and desperate.
Right, and that's where the internet cafes come in. Right?
Oh, yeah, the internet cafes were crucial.
Because I remember internet cafes, they were everywhere back then.
Oh, yeah.
And in Ghana, they became these hubs for learning and sharing information about cybercrime.
Like these digital apprenticeships almost.
Yeah, exactly. So it's in these cafes that aspiring Sakawa boys would learn the tricks of the trade from more experienced scammers.
Right. They would share tips and techniques. They would collaborate on scams.
And it's this element of collaboration that really sets the Sakawa boys apart from other cyber criminals.
It's not just individuals working in isolation. They're part of a network.
Right. And a very sophisticated network at that.
Oh, yeah, with a very specific structure and hierarchy.
And of course, we can't talk about the Sakawa boys without talking about Juju.
Right, the spiritual element.
Yeah, this is what makes them so fascinating and so different from any other cybercrime group that we've looked at.
Because they believe that they can use spiritual forces to enhance their scams.
Yeah, they'll use charms, they'll perform rituals, animal sacrifices, all sorts of things.
To manipulate victims.
To protect themselves from law enforcement.
To attract wealth and success.
Right. And, you know, it's easy for us to dismiss this as superstition.
Sure, from our perspective.
But for the Sakawa boys, this is a very real and powerful force.
It's integral to their worldview.
Yeah, it's part of their cultural heritage, and it gives them a sense of control, a sense of agency in a world where they often feel powerless.
And it also provides them with a kind of moral justification for their actions.
Right, because they believe that they're not just scamming random people, they're using their spiritual powers to take back what they believe is rightfully theirs.
It's a complex and nuanced belief system.
Absolutely. So I think we've laid some good groundwork here. We've talked about the historical context, the emergence of internet cafes, the role of collaboration, and the importance of Juju. So now let's dive into the structure of the Sakawa network itself.
Right.
because as I mentioned earlier, this is a very organized operation.
It is.
With specialized roles and a clear hierarchy.
Like a well-oiled machine.
Yes, so let's start with the frontmen.
The face of the operation.
Yeah, these are the guys who are actually interacting with the victims online.
Right, they're the smooth talkers, the charmers.
Yeah, they create fake profiles, they build relationships, they gain the trust of their victims.
Often posing as romantic interests or potential business partners.
Right, whatever it takes to get the victim to let their guard down.
They're master manipulators.
Absolutely. And then you have the hackers.
The tech wizards.
Yeah, these are the guys who are responsible for the technical side of the scams.
Right, stealing information, creating fake websites, developing malware.
All the things that make these scams so effective.
They're the brains behind the operation.
Yeah, and then of course you have the Juju priests.
The spiritual advisors.
Yeah, these are the guys who are guiding the scammers, performing rituals, providing spiritual protection.
They're the ones who imbue the scams with that extra layer of power.
Right. And they often hold a lot of authority within the network.
Oh, yeah, they're highly respected figures.
Yeah, because the scammers believe that their success depends on the blessings of the Juju priests.
It's a very spiritual operation.
Absolutely. And then finally, you have the money mules.
The essential cogs in the machine.
Yeah, these are the people who are responsible for moving the stolen money around.
Laundering the funds, making sure it gets back to the network.
They might not be directly involved in the scams themselves.
Right. They're often unwitting participants.
But they play a crucial role in keeping the whole operation running.
Absolutely. So you see, you have all these different players, each with their own specialized skills and responsibilities.
It's like a well-oiled machine.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how this structure mirrors Ghanaian society itself.
Right. There's a strong emphasis on community, on collaboration, on respecting hierarchy.
And they've taken these traditional values and applied them to the world of cybercrime.
Yeah, which makes them even harder to combat.
Because they're not just a bunch of individuals, they're a tight-knit group with shared beliefs and goals.
Right, so it's not enough to just go after individual scammers.
You have to dismantle the entire network.
Yeah, you have to address the root causes, the socioeconomic factors, the cultural influences that have led to the rise of this phenomenon.
It's a complex challenge.
Absolutely. So I think we've got a good understanding of how the Sakawa network operates.
We've laid the groundwork.
Now let's take a closer look at the scams themselves.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty.
Because these are not your typical phishing emails.
Oh, no, these are sophisticated and highly targeted attacks.
Yeah, they're designed to exploit specific vulnerabilities.
And they often involve long-term manipulation and emotional abuse.
So let's start with the romance scams, because these are some of the most common and most devastating scams that the Sakawa Boys employ.
They prey on people's loneliness, their desire for love and connection.
Yeah, and they're very good at what they do. They know how to build rapport, they know how to create a sense of intimacy, and they know how to exploit the victim's emotions.
They'll spend months, even years, cultivating a relationship with the victim.
Right, sending them gifts, writing them poetry, sharing personal details.
Making them feel special.
Yeah, and then when the time is right, they strike.
With a sob story.
Yeah, maybe it's a sudden illness.
A family emergency.
A business opportunity that requires a quick investment.
Whatever it takes to create a sense of urgency.
Right, because they know that when people are emotional, they're more likely to make irrational decisions.
And they're more likely to overlook red flags.
Yeah, so they'll send money without thinking twice.
And often these victims, they end up losing their life savings.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
Absolutely, and the emotional toll can be just as devastating as the financial toll.
Yeah, because imagine thinking that you found love only to discover that it was all a lie.
A carefully constructed fabrication.
Yeah, it can really shatter your trust in people.
It can make you question everything.
And it can take years to recover from that kind of betrayal.
So yeah, romance scams, they're really the bread and butter of the Sakawa Boys.
They're very effective, and unfortunately, they're becoming more and more common.
And it's not just happening in Ghana.
No, this is a global problem.
People all over the world are falling victim to these scams.
So it's important to be aware of the red flags.
To know how to protect yourself.
To be skeptical of any online relationship that involves requests for money.
No matter how convincing the story might seem.
All right, so we've talked about romance scams. Now let's move on to identity theft.
Another specialty of the Sakawa Boys.
Yeah, this is where their technical skills really come into play.
They use phishing attacks, malware, social engineering, all sorts of techniques.
To steal personal information.
Like social security numbers, bank account details, credit card numbers.
And once they have that information, they can really wreak havoc.
They can open credit cards in your name, drain your bank accounts, take out loans.
It's a nightmare scenario.
It is, and it could take years to unravel the damage.
Yeah, to restore your credit, to clear your name.
And the scary thing is that it can happen to anyone.
Right, we all leave digital footprints online.
And the Sakawa Boys are experts at finding and exploiting those vulnerabilities.
So it's crucial to be vigilant about online security.
To use strong passwords, to be careful about what information you share online.
To be wary of suspicious emails and links.
And to monitor your accounts regularly for any signs of fraudulent activity.
All right, so we've covered romance scams and identity theft.
2 major categories.
Now let's move on to business scams.
All right, so these scams often target aspiring entrepreneurs or people looking for investment opportunities.
Yeah, the Sakawa Boys will create fake websites posing as legitimate businesses or investment firms.
Promising high returns with little risk.
The classic get-rich-quick scheme.
And they'll often use high-pressure tactics.
Yeah, claiming that the opportunity is limited and you need to act now.
To avoid missing out.
Right. FOMO, fear of missing out.
A very powerful motivator.
Yeah, so the victim might get lured in with a seemingly legitimate business proposal.
Or a chance to invest in a groundbreaking new product.
And they'll end up sending money to the scammers only to discover that the whole thing was a sham.
The business never existed.
The product was never developed.
It was all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, and these scams can be very elaborate.
Oh, yeah. They'll often involve fake documents, forged contracts, testimonials from satisfied customers.
All designed to create an air of legitimacy.
To make the scam seem believable.
And unfortunately, these scams can be very successful.
Because they prey on people's desire for financial security.
Yeah, their dreams of a better life.
And their willingness to take risks.
So it's important to be wary of any investment opportunity that sounds too good to be true.
To do your research, to check for red flags.
To get a second opinion from a trusted advisor.
Before you send any money.
All right, so we've covered romance scams, identity theft, business scams.
Quite a range.
Now let's talk about lottery scams, because these are also quite common.
Yeah, these are the ones where you get an email or a phone call.
Congratulating you on winning a huge sum of money.
But there's a catch.
Yeah, you have to pay a processing fee or taxes up front.
To claim your winnings.
And of course, once you send the money, you never hear from them again.
You never see your winnings.
Because there were no winnings.
It was all a lie.
Yeah, these scams, they prey on people's hope.
Their desperation.
Especially those who are struggling financially.
Who are looking for a way out.
And they can be very convincing.
Because they often use official-looking logos and language.
Yeah, they might even have fake websites that look very authentic.
So it's important to be skeptical.
To never send money to someone you don't know.
To verify any lottery winnings with the official organization.
Before you get your hopes up.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about the different types of scams that the Sakawa Boys employ.
The tactics they use.
The vulnerabilities they exploit.
And the devastating impact these scams can have.
But it's important to remember that this is just a snapshot.
Right.
The Sakawa Boys are constantly coming up with new scams.
Yeah, they're very adaptable.
They're always evolving.
And they're always looking for new ways to exploit people.
So we need to stay vigilant.
We need to stay informed.
And we need to be prepared to adapt our defenses as the threats evolve.
It's like a constant arms race.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and it's easy to get caught up at the technical aspects of these scams. But I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, this is about people.
Yeah, real people.
Real people who are being exploited, who are being hurt.
And that brings us to a really important point that we need to talk about.
The darker side of Sakawa.
Yeah, the violence.
Because it's not always just about deception and manipulation.
Right. Sometimes things can escalate.
And it's important to understand that there's a potential for violence within this subculture.
Yeah, and this violence can take many forms.
It can be directed at victims.
At rivals.
Even at members of their own network.
Yeah, so let's start by talking about the violence that's directed at victims.
Because sometimes the Sakawa Boys, they don't just want to scam people, they want to intimidate them.
Yeah, they want to silence them.
Especially if the victim starts to catch on.
Right, if they start asking too many questions.
Or if they threaten to expose the scam.
Yeah, so they might resort to threats.
Harassment.
Even physical violence.
And remember, we're talking about a culture where Juju is very real. So these threats, they can be very powerful.
Yeah, they can carry a lot of weight.
Because the victims believe that the Sakawa Boys have spiritual powers.
Right, they believe that they can curse them.
That they can harm them.
So they're often too afraid to speak out.
They're trapped.
Yeah, and this is especially true for victims within Ghana.
Where the Sakawa Boys have a strong presence.
Yeah, they're often able to operate with impunity.
Because they have connection?
They have influence.
They have money.
And they're not afraid to use violence to protect their interests.
So yeah, the violence directed at victims is a real problem.
It's something that we need to acknowledge and address.
And then you have the violence that's directed at rivals.
Because, like any criminal enterprise,
there's competition.
Yeah, different Sakawa groups are vying for territory.
For profits.
For influence. And this can lead to clashes,
disputes,
even outright warfare. And again, Juju plays a role here.
Because the Sakawa Boys, they believe that they can use spiritual forces to attack their rivals.
Yeah, to sabotage their scams.
To bring them bad luck.
To even cause them physical harm. So it's a very dangerous game.
With high stakes.
And the violence can be very brutal.
And then finally you have the violence that's directed at members of their own network.
Yeah, because this is not a world where loyalty is guaranteed.
No, there's always a risk of betrayal.
Greed.
Jealous.
Paranoia. All these things can lead to violence within the network.
So a Sakawa boy might be targeted by his own crew.
If they suspect him of stealing.
Of informing.
Of disrespecting the hierarchy. And the punishments can be severe. Banishment, even death.
So it's a very violent world.
Yeah, and it's a world that's often shrouded in secrecy.
Because the Sakawa Boys, they don't want to attract attention.
They want to operate in the shadows.
They want to maintain their power and control.
So they're very good at covering their tracks.
At silencing witnesses.
At intimidating anyone who might try to expose them.
It's a very difficult problem to address.
Yeah, because it's not just about catching the scammers.
It's about dismantling the entire network.
It's about changing the culture.
It's about addressing the root causes of the violence.
Yeah, the poverty, lack of opportunity, all the things that drive young people into this world in the first place.
So it's a complex challenge.
It is.
But it's a challenge that we need to face.
Yeah, if we want to make a difference.
If we want to protect people.
If we want to create a safer and more just world.
So I think it's time to shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
And talk about what's being done to combat Sakawa.
Because it's easy to get overwhelmed by the scale of this problem.
By the complexity.
By the violence.
But it's important to remember that there are people who are fighting back.
Yeah, people who are working tirelessly to bring the Sakawa Boys to justice.
And to help their victims.
And these efforts are starting to make a difference.
So let's talk about some of the organizations that are leading the charge.
Yeah, because there are a lot of different groups that are involved in this fight.
Governments.
Law enforcement agencies, NGOs, all working together to try to dismantle the Sakawa network.
And one of the most important organizations in this fight is the SCARS Institute.
Yeah, we mentioned them earlier.
They're doing incredible work.
Yeah, they're not just trying to catch the scammers.
They're trying to understand them.
Yeah, they're researching the Sakawa phenomenon.
They're educating the public.
They're training law enforcement.
And they're working with the Ghanaian government to develop effective strategies for combating this problem.
Yeah, and one of the things that makes the SCARS Institute so effective is that they take a holistic approach.
They recognize that this is not just a law enforcement issue.
Right, it's a social issue.
It's an economic issue.
It's a cultural issue.
So they're working to address all of these factors.
Yeah, they're trying to create a more just and equitable society.
Where young people have real opportunities.
Where they don't feel like they have to resort to crime to survive.
And they're making progress.
They are.
They've helped to raise awareness of the Sakawa problem.
They've helped to train law enforcement officers to identify and investigate these scams.
And they've helped to bring some of the perpetrators to justice.
Yeah. And they've also been instrumental in helping victims.
Providing them with support and resources.
It's helping them to rebuild their lives.
So the SCARS Institute is doing amazing work.
They are.
And they're a great example of how we can fight back against Sakawa.
Yeah, by taking a comprehensive approach.
By understanding the root causes of the problem.
And by working together.
To create a safer and more just world.
It's encouraging to hear that there are organizations like SCARS making such a tangible impact. But it sounds like a monumental task.
It is, no doubt about it. But, it's not just about the big organizations and law enforcement agencies. We all have a role to play.
So what can the average person do? I mean, aside from obviously not falling for these scams.
Right. Well, awareness is key. Just knowing about Sakawa, understanding the tactics, and being able to spot those red flags is a huge step.
Makes sense. If you can recognize it, you're less likely to become a victim.
Exactly. And then talk about it. Share what you've learned with your friends, family, colleagues. Spread the word, especially to those who might be more vulnerable, like older folks or those struggling financially.
Yeah, that's so important. Because sometimes it feels like these scams are constantly evolving, finding new ways to trick people.
Oh, absolutely. They're always adapting. That's why staying informed is crucial. Keep learning, keep researching, stay up to date on the latest trends in cybercrime.
Like listening to the deep dive, for instance.
Exactly. But there are also tons of great resources online from organizations like SCARS, the FBI, even consumer protection agencies.
And of course, basic online hygiene. Strong passwords, two-factor authentication, being cautious about what you click on, what you download, all that stuff we hear about, but sometimes forget to do.
It's easy to get complacent, but those simple steps can make a big difference. And if you do become a victim, don't be afraid to report it.
Yeah, reach out to the authorities, file a report. Because even if you don't recover your losses, it can help them track down the scammers and prevent others from being victimized.
Right, and remember, there's no shame in falling victim to a scam. These guys are professionals. They're masters of manipulation. It can happen to anyone.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that we're all vulnerable in some way. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of the Sakawa Boys, what are the key takeaways? What should our listeners be thinking about?
Well, first, the Sakawa Boys show us how cybercrime is evolving. It's not just about stealing data anymore. It's about exploiting our emotions, our vulnerabilities, our hopes and fears.
It's about preying on the human element.
Exactly. And second, Sakawa is a global problem with far-reaching consequences. It's not just happening in Ghana. It's affecting people all over the world.
And it's not a victimless crime. The impact on individuals, communities, and the global economy is significant.
Absolutely. And third, while the fight against Sakawa is complex and challenging, there's hope. Organizations like SCARS are making a real difference.
And we can all contribute by staying informed, by spreading awareness, by protecting ourselves and others.
Right. Knowledge is power. The more we understand about how these scams work, the better equipped we are to fight back.
So to our listeners, if this deep dive has sparked your interest, I encourage you to explore further. Dig into the research from the SCARS Institute, learn about the latest cybercrime trends, and share that knowledge with others.
Because only by working together can we create a safer, more secure, and more just digital world.
That's a great place to leave it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of the Sakawa Boys. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.
If you have been victimized by a scam, the SCARS Institute can help you. To begin, visit scamvictimsupport.org. If you are ready to join a SCARS Institute support and recovery group, visit support.againstscams.org. To enroll in the SCARS Institute Scam Survivors School's next class, visit scarseducation.org. All SCARS Institute Victim Survivors services are completely free. We understand what you have gone through, and we can help. Contact the SCARS Institute today.